Ich darf nun auf die Bühne bitten den Präsidenten des Europaparlaments Martin Schulz, EU-Ratspräsident Donald Tusk und NATO-Generalsekretär Jens Stoltenberg. Die Moderation wird übernehmen Hans-Ulrich Jörges.
Jens Stoltenberg ist seit Oktober 2014 NATO-Generalsekretär. Als Sie das geworden sind, habe ich ein bisschen über Sie gelesen und dabei gelesen, dass Sie, als Sie Ministerpräsident waren, gute Beziehungen zu Moskau hatten. Sie haben verschiedene konkrete Fragen gelöst zwischen Norwegen und Russland. Und dann sind Sie in diese Funktion gekommen, die jetzt sozusagen, was dieses Verhältnis zu Moskau angeht, zunehmend schwieriger wird. Davor waren Sie zweimal Ministerpräsident in Norwegen und Vorsitzender der Arbeiterpartei. Und, hört, vielleicht können wir von Ihnen lernen, Jens Stoltenberg war mal Chef einer rot-rot-grünen Koalition. Das haben wir möglicherweise noch vor uns. Sind Sie davongelaufen? Wie ging das?
Well, also I had good experiences with sharing a red-green coalition in Norway. But to be honest with you, that was not my favorite government. My favorite government was a government with only the Social Democratic Party.
Ja.
But this was the way I was able to create the majority, and I'm a very pragmatic man. So then I joined the Green Party and or the Center Party and the Left Socialist, and we formed the government. And I can think it was quite.
Wie ist das persönlich, wenn man vom Ministerpräsident eines unglaublich reichen Ölstaats?
I just have to have more translation. Yes.
Wenn man vom Ministerpräsidenten eines unheimlich reichen Ölstaats zum Angestellten einer sehr viel ärmeren Militärgemeinschaft wird.
But still, NATO is bigger than Norway. Also Norway is big, of course, but it's not as big as the United States yet. So I feel that I am Secretary General in an alliance which really represents the whole of, or almost the whole of Europe and North America, and it's almost 1 billion people. So with all respect for Norway's 5 million, of course we are not as big and not as dominant as the whole of NATO.
Danke.
So I am a modest man.
Jetzt frage ich Sie mal, Herr Stoltenberg, weil Sie von diesen parteipolitischen Überlegungen auch unberührt sind. Wer regiert am Ende oder im nächsten Jahr Europa und darüber hinaus? Vielleicht 5 Frauen? Hillary Clinton, Angela Merkel, Theresa May wissen wir, Beata Szydło regiert auch schon in Polen und dann noch Marine Le Pen in Frankreich als Präsidentin?
Well, that's up to the people, the voters of Europe and the United States to decide. And I'm glad we don't live in a world where NATO decide with our armies who's going to rule in these countries. That's going to be decided through democratic elections.
Yes, we know.
Yeah.
Would that be a problem? Würde das ein Problem sein für
with women?
Wenn Marine Le Pen in Frankreich regiert?
You know, I think it's really extremely important that NATO as a military alliance do not, try in any way to intervene in democratic processes in different member countries. The important thing for us is that there are real democracies in all the member states. And I think we have seen again and again that there are different views, different opinions, discussions, also disagreements about NATO inside NATO countries. But again and again, NATO has proven that we are able to gather the necessary support from the different nations and to stay united and then also adapt and respond to an evolving security environment. So I'm very confident that our democratic societies are resilient and that we will be able also to manage different parties and different views inside the alliance also next year.
Ich habe schon verstanden, dass Sie vorsichtig sind als Generalsekretär, aber der Frage können Sie nicht ausweisen. Was hieße Donald Trump als amerikanischer Präsident für die NATO? Deren Ende? Schwere Krise? Lähmung? Spaltung?
I am actually certain that whoever is elected as President of the United States, NATO will remain a strong transatlantic alliance. And that's partly because that's an obligation. It's a treaty obligation that we stand united in NATO and protect each other. Second, we have to remember that NATO is important for Europe, for European security, but NATO is also important for the United States. So strong NATO is not only something which is nice for us, Europeans, but it's also important for the United States. It's a way to organize a world where the United States have many friends, and the closest friends are the allies in NATO. And we have to remember that the first and only time so far we have invoked Article 5, the collective defense clause in NATO, was not after an attack against any European ally, but it was after an attack on the United States, 9/11. And thousands of European soldiers from Germany and other European NATO allies have served in Afghanistan. Many have lost their lives in an operation which is a military response to an attack on the United States. So I'm saying that I'm absolutely confident that the United States understands that in the long run it is in their interest to have a strong NATO, and they will continue to be a committed NATO ally.
Herr Stoltenberg, die Idee einer europäischen Verteidigungsgemeinschaft, einer europäischen Armee, würde militärische Doppelstrukturen mit der NATO bedeuten. Können Sie sich vorstellen, dass das Sinn macht?
No, I don't imagine that makes any sense. But to be honest, I don't feel that that's the real debate inside the European Union now. I attended the defense ministerial meeting of EU just a couple of weeks ago. There was no one there arguing in favor of a European army.
Herr Juncker.
But what they argued in favor of was a stronger European defense, and that's something else. And we have to distinguish those two debates.
Verzeihen Sie, Herr Juncker, der Kommissionspräsident, hat ausdrücklich für eine europäische Armee plädiert.
But the debate which is going on now is not about establishing a European army. It's about how can we strengthen European defense.
Inside NATO, in der NATO.
Yeah, because I think that stronger European defense, that's something I'm very much in favor of. And that will be good for the European Union, it will be good for Europe, it will be good for NATO. And we have to remember that most members of the European Union, they are also members of NATO. 90% of the population living in the EU, they live in a NATO country. And there is no way we can strengthen European defense without at the same time strengthening NATO defenses. And I welcome if Europe is able to develop new capabilities, spend more on defense, integrate and coordinate the defense industries. That's something I really welcome, and actually NATO has called for that for a long time. What we have to make sure is that to strengthen European defense, do not duplicate NATO, do not become an alternative to NATO, but is working together with NATO. And actually, if you read the Lisbon Treaty, it's clearly stated in the Lisbon Treaty that European defense and security policy should not be an alternative to NATO, but should be compatible with NATO and consistent with NATO. So this should not be a competition. This should be something we do together, and strong Europe is actually good for also NATO. And let me also add that, of course, a transatlantic bond is essential for Europe. Especially after Brexit, because with UK outside the European Union, UK being the European ally spending most on defense, 80% of NATO's defense spending will be non-EU. And 3 out of the 4 battalions we are going to deploy in the eastern part of the alliance will be non-EU. It will be UK, then also after Brexit outside the EU, United States and Canada. So we should just stop this discussion about either Europe or NATO. It's strong Europe provides a strong NATO, as long as we do it in the right way, not duplication, but in coordination and in cooperation.
Herr Stoltenberg, wie sehen Sie die militärische Situation in Osteuropa und zwischen Russland und der NATO? Russland hat angekündigt, es wird, glaube ich, Boden-Luft-Raketen ins Gebiet von Kaliningrad bringen. Russland beklagt sich selbst über die aufmarschierende NATO, die immer näher an die russische Grenze rückt. Sie ist ja auch schon dort. Was bedeutet das für die NATO? Wird die NATO ihre Präsenz in Osteuropa nochmal verstärken gegen deutsche Bedenken? Wir erinnern uns an den deutschen Außenminister, der vor Kriegsgeschrei und Säbelrasseln gewarnt hat. Also, was wird die NATO tun?
So first of all, I think you have to just understand that we have seen a Russia which has really invested heavily in their defense capabilities over several years. Since 2000, they have tripled defense spending in real terms, and during the same period, Europe has decreased defense spending. We have seen that they have developed new capabilities. They have deployed more troops, but of course, the most concern is connected to the fact that they have actually been willing to use force against neighbors, Ukraine, Crimea, but also actually in Georgia. And they also have troops in Moldova against the will of the Moldovan government. So we see a more assertive Russia, we see a stronger Russia, and we see a Russia which is willing to use force. And now we have also seen that they are deploying ice scanner missiles in Kaliningrad. All of this is part of a pattern which has been there for a long time. And NATO has responded. I think we have to understand that we have implemented the biggest reinforcement of our collective defense since the end of the Cold War. We have tripled the NATO response force. We will have 4 battalions in the 3 Baltic countries and Poland, enhanced forward presence, as we call it. We have established 8 small headquarters in the countries in the eastern part of the alliance. And we have also increased the readiness and the preparedness of our forces. So we have responded in a very, strong and firm way.
Reicht das oder kommt mehr?
We don't plan to increase our presence in the eastern part of the alliance, but we will, of course, continue to make sure that our forces are ready to reinforce, if needed, in the eastern part of the alliance, which is the most vulnerable to the Russian aggression. But let me then add, it is for us at the same time very important to avoid a new Cold War. We don't want a new arms race. So I absolutely agree with Martin that we have to combine, which is the idea of both strength, deterrence, defense, and dialogue. And for me, there is no contradiction between strong defense and political dialogue. Actually, I believe that we can only have a political dialogue with Russia as long as we are strong. That's a precondition. And that's also something which I've learned from Norway. Norway, a small NATO ally, bordering Russia up in the north. We had actually quite good relationship with Russia. Pragmatic working relationship on energy, on fishery, on environment, on a delimitation line up in the Polar Sea and the Barents Sea. And our pragmatic working relationship with Russia was not something we were able to establish despite of NATO membership, but it was because of NATO membership. Because we felt safe, secure, being part of a strong military alliance. So as long as we are strong, as long as we are predictable and firm, we can engage Russia also in a political dialogue, because we need to strive for a more constructive and cooperative relationship with Russia. Russia will not go away. Russia will be there. Russia is our neighbor. So we have to actually take forward the old German idea of a dual-track approach, defense and dialogue at the same time, and that's the message from NATO.
Herr Stoltenberg, geben Sie uns ein bisschen Hoffnung am Ende dieser Diskussion. Wird der Islamische Staat im nächsten Jahr militärisch besiegt werden?
At least we are making a lot of progress. I think you have to understand that it will take time before we're able to totally eradicate IS, Daesh. But what we have seen during 2016 is that we are making progress. We have a very strong international coalition fighting ISIL. NATO allies and NATO is helping and supporting the coalition, and we have seen that ISIL is now losing ground, both in Iraq and Syria. I have no illusions that this will be easy, and I don't have any illusions that even when we get rid of ISIL in Iraq and Syria, they will still be around. They may come to North Africa. We have seen them in Afghanistan. But at least I think there is some reason for optimism, because we have seen that the international community can come together and really mobilize strong force in the fight against ISIL. Then I think it's important to underline that the fight against ISIL is partly about military means, airstrikes, training soldiers, and all that. But it's also an ideological fight inside our own countries, because we have to understand that ISIL and that extremist violent ideology has a lot of support, or at least has too much support in Europe. So this is partly about fighting ISIL outside of Europe, but it's also about fighting extremism inside our own countries. The last thing I will say about ISIL and fighting terrorism is that sometimes NATO and/or NATO allies have to deploy combat forces or to conduct airstrikes, as we, for instance, have done in Iraq, Syria, NATO allies, or NATO has done in Afghanistan for many years. But in the long run, it's much better to enable local forces to fight terrorism and extremism themselves. So I think that the viable long-term solution is not us deploying our combat troops, but us enabling local forces, local nations to fight terrorism themselves and to stabilize their own country themselves. And that's exactly what we are now doing in Afghanistan. We have ended the combat mission. We have trained the Afghans, so they're fighting the terrorists themselves. And it's much better, instead of we fighting their wars, they have to stabilize their own countries.
Vielen Dank. So, jetzt gehen wir noch ein wenig jedenfalls. Viele der Fragen, die ich jetzt gelesen habe, haben wir schon behandelt, aber einige nicht. Und eine schließt sich perfekt an Ihre letzte Aussage an. Klaus Naumann, der frühere NATO-Oberbefehlshaber, stellt folgende Frage. Ischinger hat recht, Sicherheit könnte die einigen Divisionen in Zeiten größter Gefahr für Europa sein. Aber Sicherheit in Europa ist unmöglich ohne die USA, ohne UK, ohne TU, Türkei nehme ich an. Die gehören alle zur NATO. Sollte die NATO unter diesen Bedingungen nicht eine Blaupause für europäische Sicherheit, nicht nur Verteidigung entwerfen, also neue Aufgabe haben, Sicherheit gegen Terrorismus, nehme ich an, gemeinsam innerhalb der NATO zu organisieren?
I think we have to understand that NATO has played an important role in the fight against terrorism for many, many years. Of course, NATO is not the only actor. We have a US-led coalition, we have police intelligence inside Europe, we have many, many different tools. But NATO is playing an important part. Our biggest military operation ever is our military presence in Afghanistan. And the reason why we went into Afghanistan was to fight terrorism. It was a direct response on the Al-Qaeda attack on the United States. And the main reason why we are in Afghanistan is to prevent Afghanistan from becoming a safe haven for international terrorists. We support the coalition. NATO allies participate in Syria and Iraq. NATO provides direct support. Soon we will provide AWACS support. And we train Iraqi officers. We work with Jordan, we work with Tunisia, enabling them. We have started to train Tunisian special operation forces to enable Tunisia to better stabilize and fight terrorism themselves. So NATO plays a role together with the European Union, together with many other nations and international actors. So it's nothing new that NATO plays a role in the fight against terrorism. That's an important task, and one of the main decisions we made at the summit in Warsaw was that NATO should step up our efforts to fight international terrorism. So NATO is there for collective defense in Europe, but NATO is also there as a tool to fight international terrorism.
Reinhold Hönecker, lese ich da, ich hoffe, ich habe den Nachnamen richtig gelesen, fragt Sie, Herr Stoltenberg, wie reagiert die NATO eigentlich auf die anhaltenden Provokationen, in Klammern Luftraumverletzungen seitens Russlands?
We have increased our presence in the eastern part of the alliance with what we call assurance measures. And that includes more air policing, making sure that we are able to protect all allies and also react to airspace violations. Sometimes I think there is a danger that we mix what should I say, dangerous incidents in international airspace with violation of national airspace. And actually we have seen not so many incidents of violation of national airspace, but we have seen more and more incidents in international airspace which are dangerous. For instance, Russian planes coming very close to NATO planes, and or Russian planes bussing or coming very close to, for instance, ships in the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea. So what NATO does is partly that we are present, we do air policing, but we're also working hard to establish more predictability, more mechanisms for risk reduction to avoid incidents and accidents from occurring, and if they occur, avoid them, prevent them from spiraling out of control and creating really dangerous situations. So part of the dialogue with Russia is exactly on how we can avoid dangerous situations, for instance, in the Baltic Sea.
Johann Wagner von den Vereinten Nationen in New York fragt, wie will die EU in Zusammenarbeit mit der NATO und anderen internationalen Organisationen das Problem Libyen angehen?
There are many challenges related to the migrant and refugee crisis, but at least there is one positive, message, and that it has shown how NATO and the European Union can work together. Because NATO supports the efforts of the European Union controlling the Balkan route and the Aegean Sea, and we are present in the Aegean Sea. And what NATO, provides is some naval assets, and actually Germany was key in establishing that naval presence in the Aegean Sea, working with the European Union. But the other thing that NATO provides is a platform for enhanced cooperation between Turkey, a NATO member, but a non-member of the European Union. So for me, this is an excellent example of how we need both European Union and NATO, but working together addressing these challenges.
Sind wir am Ende angekommen. Ich bitte Sie um eine kurze Antwort auf folgende Frage am Schluss. Wir haben ja viel gelernt über Schwierigkeiten voranzukommen und die verschiedenen Interessen, jedenfalls im Moment in Europa zu bündeln, auch mit den Amerikanern zu bündeln, mit den Russen wieder auf eine Linie zu kommen. Machen Sie uns doch für 2017 mal in irgendeinem Punkt Hoffnung, in einem konkreten Punkt. Wo werden wir im nächsten Jahr besser dastehen als jetzt in Europa?
I would like to say that I'm optimistic at least on two different levels. One, I think that we will make progress in the fight against terrorism, because ISIL is really on the defensive. The coalition or the Iraqi forces will retake Mosul, and ISIL will lose even more ground both in Syria and Iraq. Then no problem. So there will still be problems, but at least there is a very different situation than we had just a year ago, where ISIL really controlled more and more territory. In Europe, I am certain that we will see a European Union which remains united, and we will see a NATO that also remains united, proving that the security that NATO provides and the integration that the European Union provides will continue to protect our freedom and will continue to be the best basis for economic prosperity in Europe. And we should be proud of that in 2017, and I'm quite optimistic.
Ich schließe mich allen Wünschen an und füge noch einen persönlichen hinzu. Ich würde mich freuen, wenn von Brüssel aus, hier natürlich auch, aber von Brüssel aus wieder positiv über Europa geredet würde und man nicht nur in Sack und Asche geht, denn das ist nicht angebracht. Ich danke Ihnen sehr für das Gespräch, danke Ihnen für Ihre Geduld und wünsche Ihnen noch ein bisschen Vergnügen bei den anschließenden Feierlichkeiten. Vielen Dank.